UFC Fight Night, Korean Zombie versus Dan Ige, aka UFC Vegas 29. Welcome to another UFC prediction and analysis video by yours truly at Boxingmmapicks. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. And as usual, what we do here on Boxingmmapicks is we give you that fight by fight breakdown, that fight by fight analysis, specifically from a betting perspective. So we're going to let you know which fights are worth the value, which fights you want to avoid, perhaps which underdogs you want to take a shot at. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you might get a little bit of parlay action as well. Now on this card, we have 12 fights, 6 fights on the prelim, 6 fights on the main card. Before we get into our predictions, we would definitely appreciate all of that, all the algorithmic stuff. Definitely subscribe to the channel, like our video, comment on our video. I'll get more to that towards the end in terms of what to comment on. But for now, again, like I said, 6 fights on our prelims. Let's get to work, starting with fight number 1. We have Casey O'Neill versus Lara Procópio. And in usual fashion, I'll start this one off. I'll start with Lara Procópio. She's coming off of a good win in her last fight versus Molly McCann. That was February 2021, so just a few months ago. In the stand-up, she really likes that calf kick. If you go back to her UFC debut, I didn't really think she had the cleanest boxing. She ate a lot of shots, but she was very willing to engage, and she's definitely game. But then looking at her next fight versus Molly McCann, she definitely looked a lot more ready. She looked a lot cleaner on the feet as well. So she could be somebody who is just improving on the feet as we go along. But I'm not mad at her stand-up whatsoever. She has a very strong clinch, though. Very physical for the division. She's stocky. She's strong. She has that toughness about her, and that's hard for a lot of fighters to handle. Good shoots for takedowns as well. I mean, I've seen her shoot. I've seen her lock her arms. I've seen her land trips. Pretty good takedown IQ is what I'm getting from that. And I mean, if we're talking in terms of her accolades, she's a BJJ black belt. She's a national champion. So that tells you, everything that you need to know about her grappling ability and her ability, once she does get you on the ground on top of you. Looking at Casey O'Neill, on the other hand, she's still an undefeated fighter at 6-0. She won her UFC debut versus Shauna Dobson. She looked okay in that fight. I thought she could look a little bit better, but at the same time, it was her UFC debut. What I saw from her and what I see from her in general is good MMA stand-up, or good MMA striking, I should say. She does train out of Thailand, so she does have decent hands. She has decent kicks, pretty reliable on the feet in some ways. But again, in that Shauna Dobson fight, she didn't look amazing. There were times where Shauna Dobson did touch her. Dobson, yes, was a striker, but nonetheless, she was able to touch her up more than once on the feet. With Casey O'Neill, though, she does give you some wrestling. She's pretty good on top. She smothers her opponent, has a pretty decent ground and pound. And I mean, of course, that's how she won her UFC debut versus Shauna Dobson, eventually taking that fight to the ground. And just as a fighter, I noticed from her that she's very composed, seems very relaxed in there, seems to be in control at all times. That's something that could work in her favor. Ultimately, this is a really good fight to start the card. Really close fight to start the card. I think Casey O'Neill, I mean, obviously undefeated, so in some ways untested, but she seems to potentially have that it factor to her. Or at the very least, I have to say her ceiling seems to be higher when we compare her to Lara Procópio. In her debut, again, she wasn't really landing takedowns at will. Shauna Dobson also had moments on the feet, like I mentioned. She didn't really look fully ready for the moment, but O'Neill definitely has all the tools to win this fight. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, something tells me Procópio gets the job done here. I think Procópio has kind of a toughness to her that can match the toughness of O'Neill. I think, the striking, which, she might not get enough credit for, Procópio I'm talking about here. I think she might be able to keep up with O'Neill on the feet as well, right? I mean, we know she's the better grappler at the very least. Casey O'Neill should be the better wrestler, or maybe is the better wrestler in this fight. So it creates, again, just a very interesting dynamic to see which fighter is going to have their own way in this one. Again, in a lot of ways, I feel it's a coin flip. But at the same time, I feel like I like Procópio's toughness. I like what she showed me in her last fight versus Molly McCann. And because of that, she's going to be my pick.
Yeah, that's fair, man. That's fair. When you look at Casey O'Neill, she's out of Australia, right? So the UFC wants to push that market for sure. They already got, I think, Robert Whitaker. They got Megan Anderson. But Casey O'Neill has confidence when she fights. Like, she has a certain confidence to her game that makes you want to pick her. But when you look at her body of work, right? So she has a win versus Shanna Dobson. But now remember, Shanna Dobson is 4 wins and 5 losses in the UFC. Shanna Dobson has 1 win against Ariel back in 2017, and an upset win against Agapova, a fight that she was supposed to lose, but obviously Agapova, I believe, was cardio. She lost her energy, and obviously Dobson was able to win that fight. But when you really look at the body of work on Casey O'Neill, it's questionable. And I'm sorry, I said Australia. Casey O'Neill's from Scotland, right? So I apologize. But Casey O'Neill, she has the grappling. She definitely is really good when it comes to grappling, and it seems like she always finds herself on top. But I think there's levels, man. And when you look at Procópio's body of work, I went against Procópio in the Molly McCann fight. I believe that Procópio, I didn't think that she was able to win that fight. But after watching that fight, what I seen from that fight, I seen a fighter that has really good grappling, good wrestling, and her stand-up. She's a forward fighter, so that's very rare in the women's division, to find a fighter that just keeps moving forward no matter what. You hit her, she keeps moving forward. She has that robot style that when it comes to her stand-up, and obviously she's well adversed in the grappling. So I like Procópio in this spot. I think it's going to be a wake-up call for Casey O'Neill here. Again, I agree with Harris that Casey O'Neill definitely has a higher ceiling. But I think with Procópio's striking, where she's just marching people down, she's just moving forward, and she had a good showing striking against a striker in Carol Rosa in a fight that she lost by split decision. So she's going down as far as level of competition, fighting Carol Rosa, and now you're fighting Casey O'Neill. Even though we're not sure how good Casey O'Neill is, because again, her body of work is very low. She hasn't fought many good fighters. But I'm going to roll with Procópio here. I actually think she has the better wrestling. I think she has the better grappling as a whole. And I just think that with her forward pressure with the stand-up, even if Casey O'Neill has made improvements, like Harris, you're a boxer. It's hard to fight a fighter. It's hard to box a fighter that is just constantly moving forward, that's not feeling your punches, right? So Procópio is going to have that forward pressure, and I love that. So I'm going to go with Procópio in this spot. Judges love that, and I think she should win a decision in this spot here.
Not mad at that pick at all. Fight number 2. In that case, we have Joaquim Silva taking on Rick Glenn. How do you feel about this one? This is pretty close on the odds here. How do you feel about it?
Okay, with Rick Glenn, we know that he's a hyperactive fighter. He throws 30, 40 type of strikes every round, 20 to 40 strikes a round. So he's very active. He wants to land strikes, and he could outpoint you because of his activity. Now, we know he's coming back. His last fight was 2018. He lost the decision to Kevin Aguilar. So he hasn't fought since 2018, November 30th, 2018. So this is going to be a telling fight here as well. He's going up in weight. He's going to be fighting as a lightweight in this fight. He was usually a 145-pounder. So now he's moving up in weight as well. In this fight, I think how he wins the fight carries on, and he kind of has a cardio. He has a pace that he can kind of put on. And if he can outpace Silva in the later rounds, I could see Ricky Glenn here rallying and winning a fight here based on his cardio, because he has really good cardio. He has some ground game, so he has good grappling. And his striking, it is efficient. And again, as I mentioned, he's very active in the striking. Now, when I look at Joaquim Silva, he's a fighter that he's hard to beat in the UFC. His only losses in the UFC are against Nasrat Haqparast and Vince Pichel. So he lost to Vince Pichel in 2018, who's a really good fighter. Haqparast, we know about him. He beat Jared Gordon, beat Reza Madadi, grappler, beat Andrew Holbrook, knock him in the first round. So he can go the full rounds. He went the full rounds with Nazareno Malagarari. He's a well-rounded fighter. He's well adversed in jiu-jitsu, so he's a good grappler. He's not going to be. He should be well equipped if this fight becomes a grappling match. But I have the feeling that this is going to be a striking match. And even though Ricky Glenn's going to have the higher pace, Joaquim Silva has a good pace as well, and he's going to have the more telling shots. I think he's going to be the quicker fighter, the stronger fighter, the fighter in better shape versus Glenn, who's moving up and is not going to be in his regular weight class. So I like Joaquim Silva in this spot here. I think he's going to land the better shots. I think he's good. I think he can deal with the grappling. But I think if this is a stand-up fight, I think he's the better striker. But I believe Ricky Glenn has higher activity. But I think Silva's going to have the better shot. So I'm going to go with Joaquim Silva to win this fight either by decision or finish.
Yeah, for this fight, the only thing I don't like about this fight is that there's a number of question marks, right? I mean, Joaquim Silva, he hasn't fought in almost 2 years. Rick Glenn, to your point, it's been 2.5 years since his fight. That alone in some ways makes it a coin flip type of fight. You know, to your point, Glenn definitely has a style that's more catered to winning a 3-round fight with his pace, with his cardio, etc. Whereas Silva has a style that's more catered to hurting you, right? I think Silva, to your point, has that grappling advantage as well. Not to say Glenn doesn't have that layer to his game, but just not at the level of Joaquim Silva, at least in my opinion. And I'll keep it short. I mean, I am going to go with the fighter, and you mentioned a lot of this as well. I am going to go with the more powerful fighter on this one. You know, the fighter that I actually feel has a little bit more depth to his game. And that pick is Joaquim Silva. Again, this is a tough one. I think Rick Glenn moving up in weight makes a big difference. And I think, you know, this is a one that is pretty well suited for Joaquim Silva to win. But again, tough fight nonetheless. So let's move on to fight number 3. In that case, we have a heavyweight matchup, Josh Parisian versus Roque Martinez. I'll take this one. Again, heavyweight beware to start off. I mean, this is a relatively low-level fight. On top of that, that's 2 red flags in terms of a betting perspective. So right away, I can tell you there's absolutely no way that I do bet on this one. When I look at these fighters, Josh Parisian, he lost a unanimous decision versus Parker Porter. That was November 2020. And we know Parker Porter, you know, respectfully speaking, is a relatively low-level fighter. Josh Parisian, he's pretty big. As you can see the size difference there. I mean, it's going to have a huge height advantage, almost 6 inches, I should say. It's going to have a huge weight advantage coming in at the limit at 265. Has a little bit of a sneaky calf kick in terms of his stand-up. He fights from the outside, somewhat agile, at least early in the fight, which is a little surprising, again, given his size. Has a really long jab. We see that he has, again, a 7-inch reach advantage. So he just presents all the physical advantages that he needs to pull this one off. You know, really long 1-2 combinations when he does choose to use them. Suspect takedown defense, but I don't really need to elaborate there because this fight is definitely not going to the ground. Roque Martinez, on the other hand, primarily a boxing style of stand-up. You know, he'll throw the odd kick here and there. Primarily, he's just really winding up to look for that big right hand. Doesn't really have the most active hands. We see his striking pace at, you know, 2.67 significant strikes landed per minute. So not the most active striker, but he will, you know, engage a bit with some dirty boxing should it get to the cage. Honestly, again, like I said, I'll keep it short. This fight favors Parisian to me. He has 6 inches in height. He has 20 pounds in weight. He has 7 inches in reach. I think he may even have the better stand-up. I don't think Roque Martinez's stand-up is that good. If you watch Roque Martinez versus Dontel Mays, Dontel Mays was the bigger fighter in that match. Dontel Mays had the longer reach. Dontel Mays used that reach while Martinez had a lot of problems getting in range. And that was pretty much for the entire fight. Obviously, Dontel Mays and Josh Parisian are two different fighters, but I feel like the size advantages are very similar. And, maybe even if the ability of Parisian isn't, and I think those size advantages almost alone makes this a very winnable fight. So I'm going with Josh Parisian on this one. Yeah, he's going to be my pick. I can't see why Roque Martinez wins this outside of it being a heavyweight matchup.
Yeah, honestly, in my opinion, Roque Martinez, 35 years old, 5'10", 250-pound heavyweight. I think he's overall the better fighter here. I think he's overall the more skilled guy in this match if we're going to look at their skills from top to bottom. But I'm with you, man. I'll make this really quick, man, because this is not a high level fight. This is really low level, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on a fight of this magnitude. But I just believe Josh Parisian here. He's just a really big guy. He cuts weight to make this weight class, so he's going to be much bigger than Roque Martinez. And Josh Parisian here has the ability, or if he gets this to the mat, in this match, he's going to have Randy Couture level wrestling in this match because he's fighting a guy that he is a far better grappler than. And we know what happens when that happens, right? So as long as he avoids the knockout, Parisian, I believe, should be able to either hold him against the cage or eventually drag him to the mat. And I think one takedown, I believe in Parisian's ground and pound. So I'm going to go Parisian here. If you really look at the UFC roster, this is probably the easiest fight you can give Josh Parisian. If he can't win this fight, yeah, he probably has to leave, right? So I'm going to go Josh Parisian here to get this done.
Yeah, and agreed with this is probably the easiest matchup that you can give Parisian specifically. So yeah, outside of a heavyweight beware, he's got to get this one done. Very winnable fight for him. Let's move on to fight number 4. Pretty solid fight number 4 that we have here in the welterweight division. We have Khaos Williams versus Matthew Semelsberger. I'll start this one off as well, starting with Khaos Williams. He's coming off of a loss to Michel Pereira. That was December 2020. It's a bit of a one-trick pony. It has that scary power in his hands, of course. He'll show some fake jabs. He'll show some low kicks. But those are both really just meant to set up those power punches. And I mean, he's essentially going to look for that opportunity to explode and let punches go. Matthew Semelsberger, on the other hand, he had a pretty good win in his last fight versus Jason Witt. That was March 2021, so not too long ago. Pretty decent stand-up out of him, solid kickboxing. I like his hands. He goes to the body as well, pretty technical, and I feel like he picks his shots pretty decently. Good combinations with the hands as well. I saw decent striking defense out of him. I think he gets his kicks in there as well, diversifies his stand-up really well, and a really good counterpuncher. And again, we saw that in the Jason Witt fight where, he, on top of that, had that one-punch KO power coming off of a counter strike. And it was a short punch too, no wind-up. So not only is he a good counterpuncher, but he has that sneaky pop in his punches. Definitely puts the pressure on. I do expect him to be the fighter coming forward, even versus a Khaos Williams type of fighter. And he has shown me some takedown defense in the past, although again, I don't feel like that will matter for him because Khaos Williams doesn't have any takedowns to his name in the UFC. Again, I'll keep this one pretty short on my end. I don't really like Khaos Williams type of fighters, these one-trick ponies, these fighters that rely on their power, these fighters that think they're going to get a perfect shot in every fight, these fighters that think they're going to knock everyone out. That doesn't work at this level. It works in promotions under the UFC. It works as fighters are making their way to the UFC, but at a certain point, it doesn't really work effectively in the UFC. So really, outside of that one big shot, I think Matthew Semelsberger is the pick here. I think he has the better stand-up. I think he's the better counter puncher. I think this fight should stay on the feet. And again, we can't say he doesn't have that power because you saw what he did to Jason Witt. So Matthew Semelsberger is my pick. outside of a touch of death type of punch coming from Khaos Williams, I think Matthew Semelsberger gets the job done here.
I don't blame you on that pick. I'm going to make it quick. I'm going Matthew as well with the underdog. When you look at Khaos Williams, he's pretty average with his striking, right? So he's pretty average, right? So he's really looking for that right hand. And if he doesn't get that right hand, he doesn't really have much else. I've seen some takedowns in his fights before the UFC, so I have seen a good shot, and I have seen some explosiveness. But Semelsberger can wrestle as well, right? So he should be okay in that area. Now here's the thing that I like about Semelsberger is that as an amateur, he was what, 5-1, 5-2 as an amateur. So he wasn't really the golden egg of the group. And then as a professional, at one point he was 3-2 as a professional. He lost a fight in 2018 to Jerome Featherstone by KO in the third round, a fight he was looking good in. But then after that, he won 5 in a row. And then if you look at his fight versus Carlton Minus, he had a good win. But then obviously the Jason Witt fight, he looked different. Even though it was a short fight, he knocked him out in 15 seconds. You got to really see the improvement as far as the stand-up goes. He was calculating Jason Witt. He was calculating the distance. He landed a nice straight knockout. So I just believe Semelsberger is improving a lot between fights. That's what I've seen. And with Khaos, he's pretty much looking for that shot. If he doesn't get it, he's going to have a hard time winning a lot of fights. As the fights go on, I believe Semelsberger is going to get stronger. So I'm going to go with Semelsberger, the more well-rounded fighter. And yeah, I agree with you, Harris. I think he has the better striking. I like his counters. I think he could really cause some problems here if he avoids the power. I don't think this is a lock in any way. I wouldn't bet it only because Khaos just has that freakish power. But I like Matthew Semelsberger. I just think he's a more well-rounded fighter. And if this fight stays on the feet, I know he has to deal with the power, but I just think he has better offense aside from having less power. But I like Matthew in this spot.
Now, to your point of not necessarily betting it, what I would say on my end is that, if Semelsberger was the favorite, I'd absolutely agree. I don't think I would bet Khaos Williams can touch you once and you're done. But at a plus 150 underdog, it really intrigues me. I think I really want to pay close attention to this one. Going into the weigh-ins, I want to see how these guys look at each other in the face-off. And I want to get a really good feel on Matthew Semelsberger here because I think there could be some underdog action coming in on him. So we'll move on to fight number 5. In the meantime, we have Kanako Murata taking on Virna Jandiroba. I'll start with Virna Jandiroba. I mean, she lost her last fight. That was in December of 2020. That was to Mackenzie Dern. Obviously, Mackenzie Dern has been looking a lot better recently. She's a BJJ black belt, Jandiroba. She's a ground and grappling specialist, ultimately. Very tight top position, very quick submissions. I'm not going to say she's green on her feet, but she's definitely not the best on her feet, right? I mean, she moves a lot, definitely has that circling around the cage. And in fact, her movement often looks pretty decent, in and out movements, feints and fakes and movements around the cage, fighting from the outside. The hands just are not there to go along with it. And we saw a lot of that in the Mackenzie Dern fight, right? Mackenzie Dern, who's not even a stand-up specialist by any means, improving on the feet in her own right, she made Dern look really good on the feet. So that tells you that her stand-up is not the best. Her cardio might be a little questionable as well. Doesn't really stop her from grappling much. She did look better in the Dern fight in terms of her cardio. But again, in that fight, there wasn't a ton of grappling occurring, which is kind of surprising considering that they were both grappling specialists. When I look at Kanako Murata, on the other hand, she beat Randa Marcos via unanimous decision. That was in November 2020. That was her UFC debut as well. And I know Randa Marcos, we know her record at this point is pretty much 500. But, having Randa Marcos on your resume is a pretty valuable name in some ways. I mean, it shows that you're at the very least at this UFC level, which I think Kanako Murata is. She does have pretty good fundamental boxing technique. She's decent in top position in terms of getting on the ground. I've seen her set up chokes pretty effectively as well. Back to her stand up for a bit. I like her fakes. I like her feints to be able to bait her opponent in. Very good level changes as well, and she kind of keeps her opponent guessing. Doesn't really know what's gonna come next. She has very legitimate wrestling though. Very legitimate wrestling. You can see it with her physique. Shorter fighter, stockier type of fighter, 5'1". Jandiroba is actually going to be the taller fighter here, and she's not the tallest herself, standing at 5'3". On top of that, going to Kanako Murata for a moment, she's a 13-time world champion wrestler. So again, has those accolades under her name, has the good takedowns, has the good chain wrestling. I've seen her make positional improvements on the ground as well, passing guard, wrist control, keeping her opponents down, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, this is going to be a wrestler versus grappler type of matchup. Kanako Murata being the wrestler here, Virna Jandiroba being the grappler here. And that matchup typically favors the wrestler due to the sheer strength of the wrestler in terms of being on the ground. I think Murata also has the advantages on the feet in a big way. So again, she's going to be my pick. I mean, it's actually surprising to see her as an underdog here. I don't think this is a great matchup for Jandiroba at all, despite her being the favorite. I'm not saying Murata is going to guaranteed win, but especially when I see her at plus 125, I definitely like her in this spot.
Yeah, I'm with you here, man. I'm going Murata. Murata. So when you look at this fight, she's gonna have the better wrestling, and she has good cardio. She's able to do it 3 rounds, and she was able to pretty much make Marcos look make it look like a rookie. And Marcos actually has some of the better wrestling, not jiu-jitsu, but wrestling in that division. So I think Murata can do the same thing here. I think she can give, as long as she avoids the submissions, I think this is her fight. So I'm going to go Murata here. And I actually think people should pound this. I think people should look at this fight as a fight to just make a single bet, or maybe add another fight you really, really, really feel good about to it, and pound this bet, because I think Vegas got this one wrong. So I'm going to go Murata as well.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And good point there. This is definitely, one of those fights that you really want to consider putting some coin on. So let's move on to fight number 6, final fight of our prelims. We have Aleksa Camur taking on Negumereanu. How do you feel about this one? This is in the light heavyweight division.
Man, I'll be honest. I'm going to make this one quick, man. Like, I'm going to go Aleksa Camur. I just believe that this fighter is more well-rounded. I don't trust him. Like, I didn't like his last fight. Like, I'm really not putting any coin on this fight. But when I look at these two fighters, I think Camur has the better cardio. I think that they'll go into second round, third round. I can see him taking over the fight as the fight goes on. I think he has a better body of work, better fighters he's fought. So I'm going to go with him. I'm going to go with Camur here to get back on track here. The UFC wants him to win. They like him. He's from the Contender Series. So, the UFC wants these contender guys to do well, to make their show seem worth it, right? So this is another situation where a Contender Series guy is given a favorable matchup. When I look at Nick, he does have power. He does have that one shot. He can knock you out. But if he doesn't get that knockout, I just think that Camur is going to have more tools. And remember, Camur trains with, who does he train with? Is it Miocic? I think he trains with Miocic. Like, he's on the Miocic, I believe so.
Yep,
if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
You're correct. You're correct.
Yeah, I believe so.
Correct.
Yeah, just looking at my old notes off of when I remember studying this fight when he was on the Contender Series, right? So, again, I just think he's more well-rounded here. I'm not sold on Camur. I don't think he's a good fighter. He got walloped by William Knight from pillar to post in my eyes. That was a beatdown in my eyes, even though it was just a decision. I just believe that William Knight beat him in every aspect of the game. That's why I call it a beatdown. But I just think in this fight, Camur should be able to bounce back. If he can't beat Nick, he has to leave the UFC. So I'm going to go Camur here to get back on track.
Yeah, and I'll keep this one very short on my end. I agree with the Camur, however you pronounce his name. I agree with that pick. He's going to be my pick as well. And he's the more efficient, he's the more technical striker. I think he gets the job done. I think he should get it done. This is a favorable matchup for him. He's going to be my pick as well. So let's take this to Vegas. In that case, let's take a look at the betting lines. Let's see which fights we are considering. I know we spoke about it within the video already, but why don't we kind of make it official? Who would be your one or two underdogs that you're considering?
All right, if we're looking at this prelim, looking at Murata, man, I think that the people, even if she loses, but I don't know how she loses this fight. I think there's a lot of value being placed on Jandiroba based on what she's done in the UFC, which is fair. But I just think that Murata is going to be a problem for a lot of these fighters. I think that with her wrestling, I think she has that high level. And I just, when it comes to women's fighting, remember, you don't have to be that good everywhere else. If you have dominant wrestling, like it gets you far. Esparza, Suarez, it gets you really, really far. If you have dominant wrestling, and Murata has that checkbox. So I think Murata is someone that we all should look at here as far as making some coin on. I'm going to put a bet in here because I know these odds are going to change. So Murata is my pick.
Yeah, good point. And I am probably going to get a bet in early on that as well. Just to choose a different underdog for the sake of the channel. The only other underdog I was considering was Matthew Semelsberger. Again, I really like him here at plus 150. I know Khaos Williams obviously has the danger in his hands, but there's a lot of things to like about Matthew Semelsberger. And to your point, Zan, he is definitely improving and showed that improvement in the way that he won his last fight. So plus 150, very good value there. We mentioned Kanako Murata as well, plus 125, very good value there as well. So two solid underdogs to consider for the prelims. Why don't we take a look at then maybe our favorite one or two fights that we like on the winning side of things. Who are we considering?
All right, man. On these early cards, I like Murata.
There you go. There you go. So that's how high the confidence level is. That even
I like Murata, man.
Murata.
Let me see what else. If I have to, no. I believe Murata should be the biggest favorite on the prelims. That's how I feel about her in this spot. So Murata's my pick.
Yeah, and I'm going to provide one pick here. And funny enough, it actually goes against both of my red flags. But I'm going Josh Parisian. I mean, again, heavyweight red flag for me in terms of not betting, a low-level fight for me in terms of not betting. But again, I think you brought up a really good point at the end of that analysis. This is the easiest potential heavyweight fight that you could give him based on the UFC roster. If he can't get this done, get this guy out of here. So Josh Parisian, that's going to be the one pick that I provide. I don't think the prelims offer much in terms of very confident picks. So I'm not mad at Murata being that confident pick because I also feel the same way about that. But again, just to give a little bit of a different flavor for the sake of the channel, I am going Josh Parisian as my official favorite pick of the prelims. So we will wrap it up there in that case. As usual, all of that algorithmic stuff definitely helps us out. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, hit the notification bell. That way you'll know when our latest episodes come out. And participate in the comments. Let's have some very good conversation there. Let us know how you feel about that Murata versus Jandiroba fight. Let us know which parlay picks or favorite picks that you're potentially considering for this underdog card. And let us know how you feel about just our underdog picks in general. Did we do a good job on those? Do you agree with them? And sort of where you're going to end up putting your coin. But in the meantime, this is UFC Fight Night, Korean Zombie versus Dan Ige, aka UFC Vegas 29. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. We are boxing MMA picks, wrapping up another UFC prediction and analysis video. Let's get this money.
Let's go.